it's been a horrific start to the year, and Shane Flanagan looked very much like a coach that was out of answers.
Hello and welcome to the Offload. I'm James Willis, joined this week by Josh Morris and also journalist Andrew Webster. Great to see you guys. Hey Josh, firstly, let's just wrap up the incredible Easter Monday football with the West Tigers prevailing over Parramatta. Great for the Tigers fans and great for Benji Marshall as well. He's doing some really good things at that club.
Yeah, Tigers fans, they've had a long drought of not being a finals-bound team, but to start this early season, they look like they're capable of getting there this year. They've had some great victories, and they've had to come from behind to get those victories as well. They showed yesterday, Parramatta started fast by half-time. They had got the lead, and they probably didn't want half-time to come because they were right on top. They obviously lost Lau Lily to the sin binning, got themselves pretty close there, and then they regathered themselves again to go on and win it in Golden Point. I think they were the better team on the day, so I'm glad that the Tigers got the chocolates yesterday, but there was a lot of controversy coming out of that game.
And Webby, Newcastle doing very well despite missing a couple of star players over the last few weeks, and Penrith out in front. Phenomenal victory over the Melbourne Storm where they put 50 on over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Penrith are clearly the benchmark, but the Tigers and the Knights are the story of the competition, I reckon, so far. Just the way that, the way, as J-Mod said, the way they came back. I'm glad that game wasn't decided by two slaps in the face that led into the two penalties that squared it up. I just think, one, I don't think you should be able to captains challenge a head-high tackle. I just think that's wrong. Fundamentally wrong, but I just think the game's so quick and there's so much fatigue that they were just tired head-high shots. But the Knights, for me, I was lucky enough to have a couple of quiet beers with the Knights and the coaching staff and their old boys after the win in Vegas, and there's just a great vibe about that club. They feel like they've really reconnected with what they're all about and their community, and the way that they've been playing, despite losing their two, highest paid players, just says a lot about the culture that's been instilled in that place in an off season. So it's good to see Newcastle going well.
J-Moz, just on that and the captain's challenge, do you agree with what Webby's just had to say about the high shots?
Yep, I do. I think it's ridiculous that he was able to challenge it, and I think the NRL and the bunker, they need to start using a bit of common sense or bring in the word incidental contact again. Like, we don't hear it anymore. Like, yes, there was contact to the head, but it was minimal contact. The bloke was going down to make the tackle to stop him from trying to offload the ball. He didn't swing his arm. It was just down by his side and it made contact with the head. Now, you're telling me that hurt Mitch Moses because he got up straight away and ran to the ref to try and challenge it. Like, that is a sign that the contact did not hurt him as a player. And then it was almost like it was a square up to give that other penalty because I thought there was nothing in that one as well. And like I said, I think the Tigers were the better side. They probably deserved the win. I feel for Jason Riles because he's got a mounting injury toll, and it just gets bigger and bigger as the weeks go on. But I just think we need to get back to looking at some of these contacts as being incidental. It's football. We're going to get hit in the head from time to time, but if there's no force, why should it be a penalty?
Let's talk about the Dragons, and they've opened this season with 5 straight losses for the first time in the club's history. It's actually 9 losses in a row if you count the last 4 games from last year as well. Webby, Shane Flanagan looked like a shattered man after their heavy defeat to the Cowboys over the weekend. I know this has been a theme on our podcast in the last few weeks, but now that they've lost 5 in a row, where are things at this point in time?
Well, look, it's been a theme on every podcast and talkback show, and NRL 360 would have to close up shop if we couldn't talk about the Dragons this year because it's nothing to talk about. By the looks of it, it's true. It's been a horrific start to the year, and Shane Flanagan looked very much like a coach that was out of answers. It's not like he's not trying, and it's not like I know that loss to me it's different to the other 4 so far this year because they just fell away horrifically almost after 20 odd minutes. Look, I think talking to people at the club in the last 24 hours, they're not going to push the button on Shane Flanagan yet. But as I said on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think if he doesn't get a win before Anzac Day, then it's untenable, really. And look, the argument is that he doesn't have the players. Well, a lot of those players that he's signed in the last couple of years were his decision. The thing that I can tell you, though, talking to people at the club, it's not going to be they're not going to put the blame squarely on Shane Flanagan's shoulders. If they do end up getting rid of Flano, then I wouldn't be surprised if others went with him. Whether they'll look at Dean Young, they'll look at Mick Ennis, they'll look at Ben Harron, the GM of football, and there could be changes right across the board, which just shows you the level of concern at the Dragons about the way things have gone.
And Josh, the run from here, they've got Manly, South Sydney, and then on Anzac Day, the Sydney Roosters, and Webby indicating that is a vital game. But you would have seen the performance at the weekend, which was the worst loss for them by far. What did you make of that and where things are at?
Oh, look, it was very disappointing. I tipped them purely on the fact that they were playing at Cogra and it was time for them to stand up in front of their home fans. They got booed off at halftime and then got booed off at full time. If you're not, when you get in the sheds at halftime after being booed off the field, if you are not filthy and you are not coming out and showing a response to the fans, like, it's got to get you back up as a player. You've got to be, you've got to show some pride in the jersey and go out and perform better. And some of the tries that the Cowboys scored were just too simple. Like, Scott Drinkwater just ran around for the first touch and untouched to score a try there, and the offload from it was to Purdue, who ran the length of the field. They had the drop ball off the scrub play, which Braden Burns picked up and ran 80 metres. Like, it's just simple tries that just looked like they had no care. And there's probably, when you're going through these tough times, you look at your senior players and they're probably not up to scratch at the moment either, the way that they're performing. But it starts, the halves, they don't look connected at all. There were a couple of times there where they put in kicks, but there was no one chasing. It's like no one's speaking to each other, and they need to get that sorted out. They need to be on the same page, because right now they are not connected at all, and they need to have some sort of change. They need to bring in some players, whether or not they're right or not. Just give them a jumper. See, it can't be any worse than what they're doing right now. Like, you want to give, some jumpers to kids, who are going to just go out there and give their all, and hopefully you jag a win, and with that comes confidence, and you can go on a run. But at the moment, they look rudderless.
And Webby, there's a few elements to this. Obviously, it's being reported today via News Corp that Kyle Flanagan will return at number 7. There's speculation about whether Gutherson will remain at fullback. And the other key question is if Shane Flanagan did get moved on, and as you say, he may not be the only one, but who would be the candidate to replace him? I guess, given that Manly sacked a coach a few rounds in and they've managed to bounce back, the precedent has been set for one coach to go already.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've got no doubt Dean Young would fill in if Flano went, but whether Dean Young was the answer, from next year going forward, that's as I've been told. Like, I think he's not safe either. I think they'll look at maybe gutting out the whole coaching stuff. I think the fact that they have brought back Kyle as the organising 7 says everything. I mean, Daniel Atkinson, 2 weeks ago, Shane Flanagan was saying this is only Daniel Atkinson's 10th game at halfback in the NRL. We've got to give him time. 2 weeks later, he's moving him back to 6 where everyone thinks he should be all along. That to me just reeks of a coach making desperate moves to try and keep his job. And it'll be interesting to see when the team sheet drops this afternoon if that's exactly what happens. But yeah, he just seemed like a coach out of answers, and you could see it in the presser after the game and with his selections we've seen in the last few weeks.
Josh, just on Manly, it was an extraordinary debut as head coach for Kieran Foran, who was thrust in after the sudden sacking of Anthony Seibold. That game back on Thursday night, I don't think anyone expected that sort of outcome. Critically, 5 Manly forwards made more than 100 metres. Their forward pack had been struggling in previous weeks, but they were scoring like the Harlem Globetrotters. It was awesome to watch and great for him to get a win on the board in his first game.
Yeah, it looked like the boys just needed to hear from a fresh voice in head coach, I guess. It kind of makes you wonder if that Seabold had actually lost the change room with the performance they put in. He's probably sitting at home scratching his head going, where was this? But I think there was a difference in the way Jake played. I think he was less of a ball distributor. He's more of a runner, and that was a big difference. He got their side on the front foot a number of times, but let's be honest, the Dolphins, that was the worst performance I think I've ever seen from them. They looked like they didn't want to be there. Their tackling was horrendous. And if you're in that type of mood, you're going to lose the game by a lot. Manly were very good, but we'll see how they go up against some tougher opposition in a couple of weeks. But for Kieran, it's a great start. And like I said about Kieran last week on this podcast, Kieran wouldn't tell those players to do something that he wouldn't do himself, and we know the type of career he had. If any of the players want to take a leaf out of his book, well, then they automatically become, a better player for it. So, yeah, I think it's a good start, but it's a long season, and we'll see how he goes after a couple of losses.
Meanwhile, there's been a fair backflip with Canterbury because the Bulldogs head of football, Phil Gould, has confirmed that Bronson Xerri will actually play against Penrith and revealed that coach Cameron Ciraldo fudged his explanation for snubbing the centre at the weekend to avoid offending the club doctor. This is a story that has been published by Brent Reid in News Corp. J-Moz, at the very least, it's a fair backflip given what we've heard about this situation over the past few weeks.
Yeah, it is a fair backflip. I think, on the weekend, I think everyone was shocked when Bronson didn't replace Stephen Crichton. And then Gus comes out and explains that they thought that Crichton was going to be okay, so they put Sean O'Sullivan on, but there was a miscommunication there between the team doctor and when they realised he wasn't going to be put back on the field, well, then they'd used all their substitutions, so Cherry couldn't come on the field, which it's a good smother. It's a good smother from Gus. But look, I think they have to play him now. I think they've forced their hand. I think what needs to happen, and I think O'Sullivan needs to be the chief halfback. I think he's a great organiser. We've seen in any side that he comes into, he's the main man at getting the team around the park. I think Lockie Galvin needs to go to 6. I think his running game is his biggest strength, and I think Burton needs to go to the centres. I think they're almost trying to be too smart with the way that they put their positions in, and at the moment I think it's costing them. I think they just need, now that Crichton's probably going to be out for what looks like a month, they need to get aside and just set it in concrete for the next month and get some victories. That's all they need to focus on. They need to stop playing mind games with the players and putting them on an extended bench. Anari Tuala's been good, but I think he needs to make way for Bronson, and Burton needs to go to the centres as well.
Yeah, vital game for them against the Panthers, Webby, given back-to-back losses against Souths and Newcastle.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a game between these two clubs midway through last season, which was one of the great. I think it was who won? Was it Penrith won 8-0? Or did Canterbury win? Anyway, it was that close. I can't remember who won the game. But it was a gripping contest, and it showed just how far Canterbury have come in the last couple of years. That's why I find them such a interesting yarn now, in the sense that they finally started to be back in the top 4 and. All this speculation about the future of their players, particularly obviously Cherry, but also Matt Burton, who's been there through some tough times initially when he joined from Penrith. It looks like it's destabilising that club just as they've got back to the top of the mountain. So I thought it was extraordinary the way that Gus said on 100% Footy last night that the coach doesn't know I'm going to say this, but and then he effectively. Showed him up to be telling us fibs in the post-match press conference after the game the other night. So I don't know how Cameron Ciraldo feels about this, but it seems like it's a funny relationship there at the moment. Yeah,
vital game. Just lastly, the Parramatta coach Jason Riles said it would be common sense for his club to be granted salary cap dispensation after they lost a third player to injury through foul play. Eels winger Bailey Simonson's season likely over after he suffered a dislocated ankle in the win over the West Tigers. J-Moss, is this a fair call? There currently is no compensation or dispensation with salary caps for foul play, but when you lose that many players, it makes it tough, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, they've lost Hopgood and now Simonson to foul play. Yongi, he'll be back at some stage this season, but when you're thinking about your side, and Hopgood's a big part of that side. Simonson had just come back and was looking good, and they're going to be out. So a large part of their salary cap is effectively missing. So without that foul play, they probably still are playing. So I think he's got a fair point. It needs to be looked at.
That's Andrew Webster and Josh Morris joining us on The Offload. Now, remember, you can subscribe to the Continuous Call team through YouTube and Instagram and also on all your podcast feeds. We'll see you next time.